At number 10, we have the Houris. What are the Houris anyways? Well, they're described as beautiful maidens who await devout Muslims in paradise. There are numerous references to the Houris in the Quran, describing them as purified wives and spotless virgins. And according to Encyclopedia Britannica, some scholars actually give the Houris a metaphoric interpretation. It also has been suggested that the Prophet Muhammad actually reinterpreted angels that he saw in pictures of Christian paradise as being Houris. Moving on to number 9, we gotta look at Buraq next. Buraq is a creature in Islamic tradition that is said to be a mode of transportation for certain prophets. Most notably in the Hadith, we see accounts about the Isra and Miraj, and they state that Buraq carried the Islamic prophet Muhammad from Mecca to Jerusalem and up into the heavens and back in the same night. Now, Buraq is described as a white animal, half mule, half donkey, with wings on its sides, and the word Buraq actually translates to lightning or bright. Number 8 brings us to angels, and these are perhaps the most common supernatural creatures mentioned in Islam. And angels are real created beings, but are generally invisible like most others. They are not divine or semi-divine. Also, they aren't to be worshipped at all. They're just created beings. And angels, by nature, they submit to God and carry out his command without any question. Whatever God says to do, they just do it. And just to give you an example of the size of the angels, well, Jibril, also known as Gabriel, is the greatest angel, and he's said to have over 600 wings, and his height stretches from heaven to earth, and he can move faster than the speed of light, as all the angels can. As a matter of fact, angels are made out of light according to the religion of Islam. Marid comes in next at number 7. The Marid are considered the most powerful tribe of Jinn, and the word Marid actually means rebellious. They are the classical genie-looking figures that we would see in movies and stories like Aladdin. You know, when they rub the lamp and the genie pops out to grant any wish that the person may have. And just like we've seen in pop culture depictions, well, Marid, they can change their shape, and they're said to have a lot of pride, and they want to show off to people a lot. Number 6 brings us to the Ifrit, and now these are a powerful type of jinn and are only mentioned once in the entire Quran. And in Islamic scriptures, the term Ifrit is always followed by the expression of the jinn. So we see that it's a type or class of jinn. The Ifrit are a very strong and cunning type of jinn, and they emerge as smoke from the ground, and they form into large winged demon-looking creatures that actually are said to bleed fire. They dwell in the underworld, which is a place of punishment for those that do evil. Ghouls are up next. A ghoul is a demonic creature that is said to inhabit burial grounds as well as other deserted and abandoned places. In ancient Arabic folklore, ghouls are a very evil class of jinn, and they were said to be the offspring of Iblis, also known as Satan, which, by the way, I'm going to talk about a little bit later in this episode. Ghouls are capable of changing form, but you can always spot one of them if you look for this specific sign. Well, they actually have hooves like donkeys, and they aren't able to change that aspect of their figure. Ghouls, they roam the desert, like I mentioned, and they often disguise themselves as attractive women that try to lure people away, and if they're successful, they actually go and eat them. According to the Hadith, an effective method of banishing ghouls is to recite lines from the Quran. Next up, I want to talk about the Shik and Nasnas. Shik is a lower form of jinn. It's sort of like a half creature or like half formed, and so they look very odd, and they apparently go after unsuspecting travelers. And you know, the interesting thing is that it's said that the Shik, they're able to mate with humans. And if they do, well, their offspring is known as a Nasnas, which look very similar to the Shik. Well, they're half Shik, half human. And these Nasnas, it's said that they originate from the Hadramaut region of Yemen. Some nesnas are described as having wings like a bat. Number 3, I had to include the Quran on this list. Now, the word in Arabic literally means constant companion. And Muslims believe that Allah assigned the Quran to accompany every single human being that has been born and that will be born and that is currently living on this planet right now. The Quran push a person to do evil and disobey God's commands. So, just to clarify one thing, the Quran, they're believed to incite humans to do evil through suggestions, but they can actually become good. And this has a lot to do with the good deeds of humans that influence the Quran. For example, it is said that the Quran of the Prophet Muhammad actually became a Muslim. However, it is uncertain whether or not any other Quran besides those of the Prophet Muhammad actually have become Muslims or become good Quran. Either way, we have 2 more creatures to look at. And number 2 leads us to the Dabba, also known as the beast of the earth. Before the end of time, there's going to be a beast that will come out from the earth. And this beast will tell the world to recognize Allah as the only God that exists. Now, the beast will wear what is known as the Ring of Solomon and carry the rod of Moses. Also, those who reject the message of the beast will have the word infidel written on their foreheads. Now, once the beast appears, it's not going to matter if a disbeliever then becomes a believer, because the time for you choosing your destiny, it's going to be gone. And this is according to a hadith narrated by Abu Hurairah. Now, in the Quran, it says this: "And when the word is fulfilled concerning them, we shall bring forth a Dabba from the earth to speak unto them, because mankind had no faith in our revelation." And that's found in Surah 27 verses 82. So this beast, by the way, is actually going to audibly speak to people. That's going to be a big surprise. And number 1 leads us to Iblis. Like I mentioned, Iblis was coming up in this episode. And Iblis in Islam is the personal name of the devil, which is the counterpart of the Jewish and Christian Satan. At the time of creation of the human beings, God ordered all of the angels to bow down before Adam. But Iblis was living amongst the angels, and he refused to bow down because he was made of fire. He's, by the way, a Jinn in Islam, not an angel. So he's made of fire, and he was like, no, I'm not bowing down to somebody that is not superior to me. I'm sorry. And because he acted so prideful and disobeyed a clear command of God, God threw Iblis out of heaven, and that was his punishment. But his ultimate punishment is postponed until the day of judgment. And Iblis, who became the ruler of the Jinn, referred to as the Shaitan, tempt people to do evil and has become the ultimate enemy of all of humankind. Starting at number 10, so who are Yajuj and Majuj anyways? Well, according to one popular belief, Yajuj and Majuj are 2 tribes of the people of the lands of the Turks. Now, they aren't monsters or dinosaurs or any aliens or anything like that. They're actually human beings. However, they are said to be very wild and vicious and monstrous by nature. Now, they like to destroy things like crops and buildings and trees, just pretty much everything in their path. And yeah, they can be very violent towards people. Very scary group of people. Now, one thing to note is that they are not from people of the future. Now, they're alive and living on the earth right now. Now, one thing that was pretty disturbing I found is that the people of Yajuj and Majuj, they can drink up an entire lake.
They will drink every bit of water that's in it. وَيَمُرُّ آخِرُهُمْ. Now they're coming like group after group, yeah, because there's a large amount of them. So the first amount of them will drink it all.
But let's get serious now. So in the Quran, Surah Al-Kahf, there is a story of a righteous king named Dhul Qarnayn, and that's sometimes spelled with a Z. Now this man used to travel a lot. Once he came across a nation who couldn't really communicate with him well.
He found there a group of people, they could not speak to him. لَا يَكَادُونَ يَفْقَهُونَ قَوْلًا. What this means is they were cut off from all civilization.
But they did manage to communicate. They had a complaint that there were some people known as Yajuj and Majuj who kept causing destruction to their land, and they asked Dhul Qarnayn to help them out. And they said, "Oh Dhul Qarnayn, indeed Gog and Magog are great corruptors in the land, so may we assign for you an expenditure that you might make between us and them a barrier." And that's in Surah 18 verse 94. So Dhul Qarnayn, he made a barrier between 2 mountains, which to this day has blocked the way for Yajuj and Majuj to come out.
So they said to Dhul Qarnayn that Yajuj and Majuj are causing a lot of evil on this earth. So this means that this tribe and Yajuj and Majuj were interacting with one another. So Yajuj and Majuj are causing evil.
There's also some mystery around who this Dhul Qarnayn actually is. Now the name Dhul Qarnayn translates to he of the two horns in English, and he is most popularly believed to be Alexander the Great. However, some scholars disagree with this. Now some Muslim scholars, including those from the classical era, they have taken on another view which is in line with many modern Muslim scholars who identify him as Cyrus the Great. And this is according to Imam Majuj, who was a famous Pakistani Muslim imam, philosopher, as well as a journalist. Now other scholars have been in favor of identifying Dhul Qarnayn as Darius the Great. So whole lot of different interpretations of who this guy actually is. But the fact is that, hey, Dhul Qarnayn is a figure in Islam that sealed away the people of Yajuj and Majuj. Now it's also believed that Yajuj and Majuj will break free. So how are they going to actually do this anyways? They're trapped behind a wall. Well, you can find some narrations in the hadith relating to this. One passage says, one day the messenger of Allah woke from sleep with a flushed red face and said, La ilaha halal illah. And he repeated this 3 times. Then he said, woe to the Arabs from the evil drawn near. Today a gap has been made in the wall of Yajuj and Majuj like this. And he formed 10 with his fingers. And that's in the Tirmidhi 2187. That's a hadith. Also, there's a hadith that mentioned how they will manage to break through. And the passage says they excavated each day until when they are just about to penetrate it, their leader says, go back so that you can penetrate it tomorrow. But Allah makes it return just as it was until their appointed time, when Allah ordains to send them upon the people, and their leader says, go back so you can penetrate it tomorrow if Allah wills. So he makes this exception, and that's found in the Tirmidhi 3153. Alright, now speaking more specifically about the wall or the barrier that's blocked Yajuj and Majuj, thousands of years ago the tribes of Yajuj and Majuj were imprisoned behind an iron wall built by Dhul Qarnayn, and many sources stress that this wall was made of iron, and we all know trying to penetrate iron, that's not going to happen easily. But in any case, over the years, many different opinions have been expressed as to the location of this iron wall. And it's believed to be the Great Wall of China, which was built by the Chinese king Fogfor. Also, another belief is that it's a wall in Central Asia near Bukhara and Termiz in a place called Derbent. And there's another belief that says that the wall is in the region of Caucasus. Now let's talk a little bit about the coming out of Yajuj and Majuj, because this is a major sign in the end times in Islam. So after Isa, Jesus will kill Dajjal, the Antichrist, and Allah will inform him of the coming of Yajuj and Majuj and order him to seek refuge in the mountain with the believers. As Yajuj and Majuj will swarm in the land and keep causing destruction down the mountain, the believers will find it harder and harder to find food and water to survive. And you can find that passage in Riyadh al-Salihin B19 number 1. Another passage says this: the Prophet also told us how arrogant they will become at their success. They shoot their arrows into the heavens, so they returned and died with blood, and they say crudely and arrogantly, we vanquish those in the earth, let us dominate the inhabitants of the heavens. And that's found in the Tirmidhi 3153. Also, another hadith passage says the Prophet is also reported to have said, Yajuj and Majuj are sons of Adam. If they were allowed to come out, they would cause mischief and ruin people's lives, and not one of them would die before leaving behind 1,000 or more of his offspring. And you can also find that in the hadith. Now, on top of being a major sign of the end in Islam, the Quran tells us how the end of the world will actually be signaled with the release of Yajuj and Majuj from behind the wall. The destruction will happen by God in a single day, and that would signal the day of resurrection. So, you know, this is like the final event. So remember the hadith, which are the recordings of the Prophet Muhammad that I mentioned, that said that they dig under the wall every night, they try to escape only to find that every single morning morning, it's restored by Allah. While only at a specific appointed time will Allah allow the wall to actually collapse, and that will free Yajuj and Majuj. So this is why Muslims view the belief and understanding of Yajuj and Majuj as something that's very crucial and extremely important to their faith. And the final thing I want to share with you is, we know there's going to be the destruction, but how will the destruction of Yajuj and Majuj actually happen? Well, it's said that Isa, or Jesus, will make a dua, which is making a request through prayer to Allah to destroy them. And Allah will send insects which will attach onto their necks and they will all die. And that's in the Riyadh al-Salihin B19 number 1. And their final destruction will be the hellfire because of how they continually lived on earth. Another passage says, the messenger of Allah said, Allah the high and glorious would say, O Adam, I and he would say, at thy service and at thy beck and call. Or Lord, the goods in thy hand, Allah would say, bring forth the group of the denizens of fire. And he, Adam, would say, and it would then be said, there are out of every 1,999. It is at this juncture that every child would become white-haired and every pregnant woman would abort, and you would see people in a state of intoxication, and they would not be in fact intoxicated, but grievous will be the torment of Allah. The companions became sad upon hearing this, and they asked the Prophet, Messenger of Allah, who amongst us would be that unfortunate person who would be doomed to hell? And he said, good tidings for you, Yajuj and Majuj will be those thousands who would be denizens of hell, and a person selected for paradise would be amongst you. And that's found in the Hadith, Muslim 222. So starting off with number 10, this one was a very fascinating one. So we have the Hur'in, and these are female type beings in Islamic mythology. They're often associated with the 72 virgins referenced in the Hadiths who await the devout Muslims in paradise. Now, there are numerous references in the Quran describing them as purified wives and spotless virgins. Some, however, say that it is a mistranslation of angels, or even metaphoric for the rewards one will receive in paradise, rather than being literal beings. And number 9, we have the Daba. So the Daba is referred to as the beast in the Bible, but in Islam it's generally taught that this is a creature that will appear during the end times and is one of the major signs of the day of resurrection. The role of the Daba will be to distinguish the believers from the non-believers, and this beast will light up the faces of believers, and with a ring he will stamp and darken the faces of disbelievers. Buraq comes in at number 8, and the word Buraq translates to lightning or bright, and this is a creature in Islamic tradition that was said to serve as the transport for certain prophets. So the Hadith says that the Buraq carried the Islamic prophet Muhammad from Mecca to Jerusalem and up to the heavens and back by nighttime. And number 7, we have the Qareen. So the Qareen is classified as a jinn type creature, although usually not actually a jinn, but Muslims believe that Allah has made them accompany every single human being, and the Qareen pushes a person to do evil things and to disobey Allah. So they have a pretty bad influence on people. Moving on to number 6, we have the Kiraman Katibin. Kiraman Katibin translates to honorable scribe, and these are 2 angels called Rakib and Atib that sit on the human shoulders, one on the right side, one on the left, and they literally write every single thing that we do. Good deeds and bad deeds, everything. You name it, they write it down. And on the day of judgment, they will present to God every single thing that they recorded a person doing. We've reached number 5, halfway in. We have the Sheikh. Now the Sheikh is a lower form of jinn, and it's a half creature, or literally only half formed, and so they look very odd. They apparently go after unsuspecting travelers, and the Sheikh is also able to mate with humans, and if they do that, that offspring is known as a Nasnas, which looks very similar to a Sheikh, and I do not ever think I want to see one of those. Not even I think, I know I never want to see one of those. Next up, we got angels. So in Islam, angels are real created beings, but they're generally not able to be seen or heard by human beings, and they are not divine or semi-divine. They're not God's associates that manage different regions of the universe. Also, they're not to be worshipped or prayed to. All angels submit to God and carry out his commands without question. Now Jibril, or angel Gabriel, is the greatest angel, and he's said to have 600 wings that cover the sky. His height stretches from heaven to earth, and he can move faster than the speed of light, as all angels can do. Oh, ghouls come in at number 3. So ghouls are a demon or monster that feed on human flesh. Ugh. You can find these living in tunnels underneath graveyards, and according to the hadith, an effective method of banishing ghouls is to actually recite lines from the Quran. These guys are vicious, they're just evil and nasty creatures. And number 2 brings us the Ifrit. An Ifrit is a powerful type of demon, and they are only mentioned once in the Quran. In Islamic scriptures, the term Ifrit is always followed by the expression of the Jinn. So the Ifrit are a strong and cunning class of Jinn, and they emerge as smoke from the ground and form into large winged demon creatures that bleed fire. They're from the underworld, which is a place of punishment for evildoers. And at number 1, we have Iblis. So Iblis in Islam is a personal name of the devil, which is the counterpart of the Jewish and Christian Satan. At the time of creating human beings, God ordered all the angels to bow down in obedience before Adam, the first man created. Now Iblis refused to do this, claiming that he was a much better being since he was created of fire and humans were made from clay. So for acting so prideful and disobeying God's command, God threw Iblis out of heaven, and his punishment, however, was postponed until the day of judgment. Iblis, who became the ruler of the Jinn, who are also referred to as Shaitan, tempt people to do evil things. So starting at number 10, we have the Archangel. So an Archangel is a superior or a higher ranking angel, and in Islam, the archangels that are specifically mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah are as follows. We have Jibreel, that's the archangel responsible for communicating the messages from God to the prophets. There's Mikael, responsible for the forces of nature and ensuring that it rains and things like that. Israfil is the archangel that will blow the trumpet to announce the day of the resurrection. And it's said that Israfil actually has the trumpet at his lips just waiting for the command from God. Azrael, he's the angel of death. Malik is the angel of hellfire, and Ridwan is the angel of paradise or heaven. But getting into some other types of angels, next up are the guardian angels. So what's a guardian angel? Well, these are the angels that have a job description of just protecting and guiding individuals. They also can protect groups of people as well as even countries. Now, every single person has 2 guardian angels, one in the front of them and one behind them. However, in actuality, each person is assigned 4 guardian angels because they take turns, so 2 of them guard you during the day and the other 2 guard you during the nighttime. So you always have at least 2 of them with you. Next up is the Kiramin Katabin. These are the recording angels. Now there are 2 recording angels mentioned called Rakib and Atib, and they record everything that people do. Every single word, every action done by a person. So these angels, they don't mess around at all, because those naughty things that you do that you're not supposed to do and you think like no one is seeing you do them? Yeah, they record those stuff too. Ishim is next up at number 7. So the Ishim are angels that are said to have the closest relationship to what we as human beings are doing on a day-to-day basis. There was an angel made up of half ice and half fire, often portrayed with the name Habib. Now this angel was encountered by the Prophet Muhammad during his night journey in the first heaven. The angel Jibreel told the Prophet Muhammad that this angel offers advice to the believers on earth and actually prays for them. At number 6, we have the angels of death. Neziat and Neshhitet are 2 classes of death angels that are subordinates to Azrael, who is the archangel of death that I mentioned in number 10. Now these angels are responsible for taking the souls of those who pass away. Neziats are ordered to take the lives of unbelievers by force, but the Neshhitets take their life very gently. Now, not much is known about these angels, the Dardail, but the Dardail, which translates to the journeyers of God, move very quickly and are always on the lookout. Why? Because they are the angels who are given the task of traveling all around the world, constantly in search of people and groups of people who remember and honor God's name. There's also an angel named Dardail that is invoked during exorcism, but I'm not exactly sure if they're connected. Zebeniye is next, and the Zebeniye many are known as the forces of hell, and they torment the sinners. They are also called angels of punishment or the guardians of hell, and they are usually identified with the 19 angels of hell that are mentioned in the Quran. In the number 3 spot, we have the Hamlet al-Arsh, and those are the bearers of the throne. Now, these angels are usually portrayed in an animal-like form because they are described as looking like different creatures such as an eagle, a bull, a lion, and a human all together somehow. In other hadiths, they are described as having 6 wings and 4 faces. Now, if you're familiar with the Bible, these angels are comparable to the seraphim found in the book of Isaiah and Revelation in the Bible. And actually, you know what? Let's take a look at the seraphim in Islam next. So seraphim means fiery one or fiery serpent depending on the context. They're mentioned in the hadith in a conversation between the Prophet Muhammad and God during his night journey. Sometimes the archangels Jibreel and Israfil are identified as being seraphim as well. In one Islamic narration about angels that were commanded to bow before Adam, Iblis is said to have refused to bow because he was a seraph himself, made from fire, and was better than Adam. And the final group of angels to look at are the cherubim. So the cherubim are mentioned in Islamic traditions, however they're not mentioned in the Quran. The cherubim continuously praise God, and they're described as being bright because none of the other lower angels can even look upon them. The cherubim are so bright that the light from one of them can fill the entire earth. And in Islam, when Moses asked God to show his face to him, God made one of the cherubim shine on the mountain where Moses was, and it broke it to pieces. And in this tradition, God was just showing Moses that since he couldn't even handle looking at a cherub, how does he expect to handle looking at God himself directly? Starting at number 10, we have the Marid. The Marid are considered the most powerful tribe of Jinn, and the word Marid means rebellious. They're the classic type of genies like you would see in movies like Aladdin, and they're often associated with water. Marid can change their shape, and they're said to have a lot of pride and want to show off a lot. Usually depicted with hands folded with a barrel chest. Number 9 brings us Ifrit. Now they're only mentioned in the Quran just one time. In Islam, the term Ifrit is always followed by the expression of the Jinn, the Ifrit of the Jinn. That's how usually sentences are written. They are very powerful and they emerge out of smoke from the ground, and they form into large winged demon creatures, and they actually bleed fire. And they're from the underworld, which is where the evildoers are gonna go for their punishment. We have ghouls at number 8, and these are jinn that haunt the cemeteries. They're flesh-eating creatures, and they like to eat living flesh as well as dead flesh. They don't care. Sometimes though, they appear as beautiful women to lure men. Moving on to number 7, we have the Silat. So these also take on the form of beautiful women to lure men, and they also have intercourse with them and can procreate with them. These are akin to the succubus, but the Silat aren't always around doing evil things. Sometimes they do a bit of good as well. Number 6 brings us the Sheik. So the Sheik is a lower form of jinn and also a half creature, really half formed creature. They look very weird, and it's said that they go after travelers who just aren't paying attention. And the scary thing is that the Sheik are able to procreate also with human beings, and they can produce offspring, and these offspring are called Nas, and they also look a lot like the Sheik. Next up, we have the Hatif. So Hatif is a type of jinn. They have no physical form, they're just disembodied voices, and the Hatif mimic the voices of people's loved ones and call out their names. And again, they have no form, but they always sound like somebody that you know, whether it's a close friend or family member, somebody that you're related to. So if you do hear your name being called out and it sounds like somebody that you know but you don't see anybody, it could be a Hatif. So I'm looking at the Qareen next up, and the Qareen, they incite humans with evil suggestions, but they can become good also based on the good deeds of humans. So for example, it's said that the Qareen of the Prophet Muhammad became Muslim. However, it is uncertain and is not really specified whether or not any other Qareen outside of the Prophet Muhammad have become good for the actions of another human being. Next up is Hind. So scholars debate this, whether or not the Jinn are a subclass of Jinn or a completely separate group altogether who rival the Jinn. But the Jinn and the Jinn, they're said to have waged war against one another, and according to some accounts, the Jinn supported the angels led by Iblis during a battle against the Jinn that lived on the earth. Jinn are also created out of fire just like the Jinn. I'm looking at the Jann now at number 2, and the Jann are shapeshifters who live in the desert, and they take the forms of whirlwinds as well as white camels. Now they're pretty open-minded when it comes to humans. They have the power to hide or reveal bodies of water in the desert, and this is all just dependent on whether or not they like a particular traveler. The Jann are also the enemy of the Ghoul, and throughout history the Jann have protected quite a bit of armies that they have deemed righteous while stopping those who are seen to be unworthy. So history is greatly affected of whether or not the Jann step in like this. And at number 1, we have the Palis. So the Palis is just straight up creepy. Like, they are vampiric footlickers that are found in the desert. And according to the legends, they are not that smart though. They attack people when they're sleeping, and they drain their blood by licking the bottom of their feet. And since they're not very smart, you can easily fool them just by covering the bottoms of your feet, and they're gonna be like, I have no idea what to do. Okay guys, so those were 10 types of Jinn that exist inside of Islamic theology, and by no means was this an exhaustive study of the Jinn. There are more types that I didn't even mention in this episode, so sound off below in the comment section